Almost there. Okay, welcome everyone as you're all coming in. Okay, we are now live. Perfect. All right, well, welcome everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for coming tonight to an evening of Kristen's. I am Kristen with an I. I'm with Midtown Reader, a local independent bookstore here in Tallahassee, Florida. We're so glad to be kicking off our 5th anniversary celebration by hosting Florida's own Kristen Arnett and her newest novel, With Teeth. Before I introduce our guest further, please note that we'll allow some time at the end of our discussion for questions from the audience. You can submit a question during any time of the discussion using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. If you're in person at our watch party, please just let Kaylee, our events coordinator, know and she'll pass through your questions. If you'd like to purchase the book, you can order online at midtownreader.com, over the phone, or by stopping by our store in person. If you are local, we are having a weekend-long 5th anniversary bash where you'll be entered to win raffles, sidewalk sales, prizes, a bunch of fun stuff. So please make sure to join us in store if you're local. With that being said, it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's author. Kristen Arnett is the author of New York Times bestselling novel, Mostly Dead Things, and the story collection Felt in the Jaw. A queer writer based in Florida, she has written for the New York Times, BuzzFeed, McSweeney's, The Guardian, Salon, and elsewhere. She has been a finalist for the Lambda Literary Award and a winner of the Ninth Letter Literary Award in Fiction and the Coyle Book Award, and was just longlisted for the 2022 Joyce Carol Oates Prize. Congratulations, Kristen.
Thank you.
Kristen Arnett visits us tonight to talk about her new novel, a surprising and moving story of two mothers, one difficult son, and the limitations of marriage, parenthood, and love. If she's being honest, Sammie Lucas is scared of her own son. Working from home in the close quarters of their Florida house, she lives with one wary eye peeled on Samson, a sullen, unknowable boy who resists her every attempt to bond with him. Uncertain in her own feelings about motherhood, she tries her best, driving, cleaning, cooking, prodding him to finish projects for school, while growing increasingly resentful of Monika, her confident but absent wife. As Samson grows as Samson grows from a feral toddler to a surly teenager, Sammie's life begins to deteriorate into a mess of unruly behavior, and her struggle to create a picture-perfect queer family unravels. When her son's hostility finally spills over into physical aggression, Sammie must confront her role in the mess and the possibility that will never be clean again. Kristen, thank you again for joining us tonight. I'll let you take it away with your reading.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I am so thrilled that I'm able to be here. I wish I was able to be there in person, but I am so thrilled to take the time and read to you all. I feel like I don't get to do that much anymore, so it's a genuine pleasure. I'm going to read from the beginning of the book, so I don't need to tell you anything. And also, you gave a wonderful synopsis, so it's like basically everyone's set up to hear what I'm about to read. But I'm just going to read from the beginning of the book, and then we can chat it out and have a drink. And I think that's nice. But okay. The man took her son's hand and walked casually toward the playground exit. Sammie had left him on the swing set. He'd just learned to work the swing himself without her pushing, which was a relief. So she let him stay on for a few more minutes while she cleaned up and gathered their things. She'd said, "I'll be right back, and keep pumping your legs, you're doing great." And then she'd walk down to the gate that led to the main exit, passing a woman with a double stroller bogged down in diaper bags and a kid so big that their legs hung down either side. It was stiflingly hot outside, even though it was already December, and the woman was huffing and puffing her way through the silty dirt with all that weight. She had on a pink visor with a palm tree and the word Orlando embroidered in cursive script. She was muttering something Sammie couldn't make out. Many, it sounded like, or maybe money. It sounded like crazy person gibberish. Sammie hurried past so she wouldn't end up getting involved. There was a garbage can near her car, but it was rancid and overflowing already, so she wadded her son's half-eaten lunch up tight in its paper bag and dropped it onto the front seat. It was so scorching inside the car that she opened all the doors and stood outside for a minute to let the heat roil out, because Samson would start crying if he felt sticky, and she was too tired to deal with it. A cloud of gnats circled her head, thirsty for the sweat beading on her neck, and she swatted at them absent-mindedly. She picked up her son's bottle of overheated lemonade from the floor, grimacing at the chunks of backwash before dumping it out onto the sun-soft asphalt and tossing it back onto the seat. But it bounced and rolled up onto the floor, and her back hurt too much to pick it up, so she didn't. Her back hurt because she'd spent the last 3 months picking up Samson and taking him to the bathroom every night after he wet himself. 4 years old and still wetting the bed. But then every child was different. That's what the doctor said. Sammie wasn't sure she believed it. So she left the bottle there and turned back around. There was the man walking away with her son. "Hey," she said, because no other words would come. "Hey." The man and Samson didn't stop. They didn't walk any faster either, just kept strolling toward the exit on the far side of the playground. Her son was holding the man's hand as if he'd known him his whole life. The guy was medium height, in his 40s maybe, with thinning dark blonde hair and a scruff of beard, wearing a gray polo tucked into dark blue jeans, white sneakers. Her son had on khaki shorts and his yellow t-shirt with rough and tumble, the cartoon Dalmatians on the front. His hair was a real cloud of curls from the humidity. It was well past time for a haircut, but Samson had thrown a fit when she tried to take him in. Sammie jumped the fence. She didn't know she was going to until she did. Didn't even know she could, really. She wasn't particularly athletic and her body was small, but she vaulted it and landed directly on the other side. And then she ran. She kicked up a storm of mulch and one of her sandals fell off, but she kept going. "Hey," she kept yelling louder and louder, but neither the man nor her son looked back. Her son never listened when she called him, never responded to his name or to her commands. The man had let her son through the gate, and now they were walking through the parking lot, headed toward a big red truck. She stopped yelling and ran faster. He opened the passenger door. Samson just stood there beside him. She could see the man's lips moving, but she couldn't make out any of the words. Her son, quiet all day, every day, looked up at the man and smiled. Actually smiled, full on, toothy grin. Sammie started screaming, not just a scream, a prolonged siren shriek rising at the end like the wail of an ambulance. Still nothing from the man, nothing from her son. Could anyone hear her? When she finally reached them, the man was buckling Samson into the front seat. She pushed past him and yanked her son out. Then her back, already strained from running, seized up altogether. She crumpled and almost dropped him onto the asphalt, catching him by the arm just in time. She was wheezing, out of breath. Her foot was bleeding, she saw now, and so was her left thigh from when she'd scratched it hurtling the chain length. "You," she said, took a breath, took another breath. "You, my son, you." The man put up his hands as if to ward her off. Ward her off. Unreal. He was about to abscond with her kid in the middle of the afternoon, and he was acting like she was the crazy one. Then again, she probably looked crazy. She felt crazy. He didn't look scared at all. In fact, he looked concerned. She studied his face, tanned and wrinkled around his deep-set eyes. He looked like the kind of guy who smiled a lot. He looked like someone's nice neighbor. "I was just showing him my truck," he said. "Kid said he liked trucks." Samson was yanking at her hand to get away, and she gripped harder. Your truck. I swear." The man smiled at her, revealing a line of very large, bright teeth. Super white teeth, all even. Maybe not even real teeth. Too perfect for that face with its crooked nose and scratchy beard and smile wrinkles. "I'm calling the police," Sammie said. But where was her phone? Back in her car, along with her keys, along with all her stuff. Where was her other shoe? Halfway across the playground. "Mom." Samson tugged her hand again, sweaty fingers wriggling. "It's got CB radio." She looked down at her kid, and he looked back at her with that same indifferent look he always had. No grin for Mom, even though she'd saved him from imminent danger. No thought at all to how her heart was hammering inside her chest. She could have a heart attack right there in the parking lot, and he'd just climb up into the truck over her downed corpse. She looked down again at her bleeding foot. One of her toenails had ripped half off, the littlest one on her right foot, and she was standing in a small puddle of her own blood. "I'm calling the cops," she repeated. "I'm calling them right now." The man closed the passenger door. Then he skirted around the front of the truck and opened the driver's side door. "Don't you get in that truck," Sammie yelled. Samson was squirming and she could barely keep a grip on him. She stepped back, dragging her son out of the truck's path. "Don't you dare get in that truck. I'm calling the cops and you're gonna stay right here." The man didn't listen, didn't even look at her, just climbed in and started the engine. He was going to leave. He was going to drive away from this, and there was nothing she could do to stop him. "Help," she yelled. Samson wriggled and nearly escaped, so she caught his t-shirt by the neck and gripped him there too hard, she knew, because he made a squeak and then stopped moving. "Someone help me. Child abduction." There wasn't anybody else in the parking lot. She looked around frantically and saw that the woman who'd been pushing the stroller with the kid too big for it was setting out a picnic lunch. Only 50 feet away, maybe less, and still the woman didn't acknowledge her screams for help. She pulled Samson a few feet further back, worried the man might plow the truck straight into them. But he just eased around Sammie and her son and pulled out of the lot. It was a Dodge, a bright, glossy red Dodge. She strained to see the license plate and started repeating the numbers aloud. GN5 8V6, GN5 8V6, GN5 8V6. Samson was on his feet, but hanging limp, dragging like he weighed 1,000 pounds, the way he always did when he was being forced to do something he didn't want to do. She kept repeating the plate number as she struggled back to the playground, steering him in front of her with one hand clamped around his neck and a fistful of his t-shirt. There was something in the sole of her foot, glass maybe, and her toe was throbbing and her back hurt so bad she couldn't breathe. It felt like the truck had run her over. Throughout all of this, the mother with the stroller had been sitting calmly nearby at a picnic table under the park's solitary oak tree. When they reached the fence, she called out to the woman to call 911. Then she sat down right where she stood and wept. "Ants," Samson said, rubbing at his neck. He had a wild red mark where Sammie had grabbed him and his collar was all yanked out. His face was dirty. He could use a wet wipe. The woman came over and handed her a cell phone. "I didn't know what to tell them," she whispered, as if the situation were some kind of embarrassing secret. Her own kid was still sitting in the stroller, Velcro shoes kicking so hard the bags on top nearly fell off. Sammie wondered if the kid had some kind of problem that required them to be in a stroller. But what did that matter? She needed to focus. Sammie took the phone and spat out the license plate number to the dispatcher before she forgot it. Then she backed up and tried to explain what had happened, calling it an attempted abduction. She described what the man looked like, what he'd been wearing. She told them about his too perfect teeth, how his truck had a CB radio. She ran through everything she remembered, which wasn't much. She could barely remember her own name. It had all happened so fast, sped by in a blur. Then, in a fit of embarrassment, she hung up, only to realize she hadn't taken down any information. She didn't know the dispatcher's name. All she knew was that it was a woman, or she thought it was a woman. Anyway, with that high-pitched voice, and Sammie had hung up before giving them a number to contact her. How'd they reach her? Was the callback number logged automatically? It was the stranger's cell phone, not Sammie's. Would she need to call back and start all over with someone new? Already the license plate number had flown from her brain. She looked down at her son leaning against the fence. "Ants," he said again, and he kept saying it. "Ants, ants, ants." And then she felt them crawling up her legs. She leaped to her feet and dusted them off, then moved the both of them around the corner to sit in a spot without any bugs. There were hundreds of dandelions peppering the grass, wild, fluffy things that stirred in the breeze, but her child picked up an abandoned straw from a fast food cup and started playing with that. She was going into shock. She could feel it. Her entire body was shutting down. She knew she should call her wife, tell her what happened, but all she had was this borrowed phone, and she couldn't remember the number. Why don't I know my wife's phone number by heart? She wondered. What if there was an emergency? Samson dug the straw into the dirt and scooped some up, then blew into the other end. Dirt rained down onto Sammie's head, sprinkled down her top. Then he did it again. Sammie just sat there, too exhausted to stop him. Finally, the other woman came over to get her phone. When she saw what Samson was doing, she took the straw away herself and tucked it into her pants pocket. "Don't put things from the ground in your mouth," she said. "That's not nice." As she walked away, Samson picked up a fistful of dirt. He held it over his mother's head, slowly opened his fingers, and let the dirt land where it wanted. Okay, let's stop there.
I love that you opened with the first chapter of the book because I felt like that set the tone for the entire book. Yeah, this was honestly a brutal book. I'm sure that my blood pressure the entire way through it was just sky high, like with such an intense action scene in the beginning and that it just like carried through the rest of the way. It was frustrating, stressful, it was horrifying, which is especially interesting, like tone to take in the exploration of motherhood, especially lesbian motherhood. I feel like motherhood in and of itself, as someone who's not a mother, is an absolute terror. And then you made it queer. So it's just honestly pure chaos. So where did such a huge undertaking of tapping into the brain of like a chaotic lesbian mom come from?
Yeah. It was a thing I was thinking about kind of piecemeal, I think. For myself, I feel like all of my best idea, I'll put best in quotes. I feel like all the ideas that won't leave me alone, that like want me to work on them, are like kind of come to me in like fits and starts. And this was, especially with novels, I need to feel like I can see a shape in my head to put something together. And this was a book that felt like it had a shape to me, like contextually. I spent several months writing like a 40,000 word draft of something that did not end up being this book. I started out writing, yeah, like we've all been there, where it's like, oh, this is the thing I'm writing and this doesn't work. Yeah, I was like, well, and straight into the garbage, which I think is good and normal. Like I am a huge fan of throwing things away. So it's like, I love to chuck something in the little recycling bin, but I was writing this book from the viewpoint of, I was like, because I'm always interested in the ways that people fail. I think failure tells us way more about ourselves than the successes do. So yeah. And I was like, okay, I'm interested in the ways in which like maybe like what does like queer motherhood look like, especially if it's a person who's maybe kind of shitty at it. Like, what does it look like to be a person who is like doing this kind of thing, has made a conscious decision to do this, because two lesbian moms mean you're figuring out like what, you know, like the logistics of getting pregnant looks like you've made a decision to do this. Like, what does it look like when you're like, actually, this isn't what I wanted, and also I'm not great at it. So I started off with this book that was a woman whose adult son moves back home with her after he has some things happen in his life. And it's the two of them as adults living together in a house. And I wrote 40,000 words of this, and every other page I was like just migrating back to the past, because I was like, oh, I need to tell about, like, I need to set up some kind of things, because in my mind I was like, I'm going to write about the ways in which like the past has affected their present and their relationship with each other and like who they are as people. And I was like, actually, this book is not starting in the right place. I was like, this book needs to start with them as like, he's a child. And I scrapped it, and that day I wrote that scene that I just read. I was like, okay. And then from there it went very quickly, but it did start from this point of view where I was like, what does like queer motherhood look like in terms of like failure? And also the idea, I think very much was, I was obsessed with the idea, and I don't think I will ever not be obsessed with this, because I am a writer who's obsessed with like the family and a household and like whatever a family looks like. You know? And I was like, like everyone in a household is essentially an unreliable narrator. So like, you know, like families all share, you know, stories, like, you know, like household lore and narrative and like family stories, whatever that family looks like. But according to whoever is telling that story, like the story is that person's story, and they're not necessarily like a reliable narrator. And I was like, I want to write a book from a gay mom who is a very unreliable narrator.
Very unreliable, yeah.
And she's close with us, even though it's like third, it's like a very close third. And I was like, she's the least reliable person, and we're gonna only get like access to the story through her. And she's like a person who's like continually like failing at things. And I was like, this is what the story is to me. So I was like, it's a book of failure and unreliableness.
It's definitely very unreliable. It's definitely told specifically from her point of view. And I think that was one of the most frustrating things for me, is that one of the best scenes for me is like when she was finally like interacting with Samson in the game of truth. And I was just like, we're finally seeing inside of his brain. And I was like, okay, like fine, we get to like see someone else's point of view. But even then it was still told from a very like unreliable point, to the point to where throughout the entire story Samson just felt like unknowable, and I felt like that's probably how Sammie definitely felt as well.
Yeah, I mean, I love that scene. I think, first of all, I think it's like a very funny scene, and like has the scenes in the book that I felt like that tell us the most about like what's happening are the scenes in which like Sammie could make a particular choice and she doesn't, right? Like the opening of the book is like, what's like the natural, I don't know if it's a natural response, like what's the response that would happen most often is if you thwarted an abduction of your child, would be like, oh, thank God you're safe. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm so like, but her response is kind of like, why did you try and get away from me? Like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with me? And that scene for me, like when she's at that restaurant where she's finally like, I'm gonna get to know my kid. He's a teenager and I'm gonna sit with him. I'm gonna get like, it's probably not great to be like, I'll trade sips of beer for
Yeah,
you.
probably not great, but
I was like, okay. But I was like, okay, seems like something she would do. But I was like, you know, like, of course she would do this. But I was like, she has an opportunity to, because there's this point in which she's asking him questions, right? Like every sip of beer, you give me an answer. And she asks him like at one point, like, what's your favorite color? And his response is like, how do you not know this? Like I've told you so many times, you don't listen to me. Like I've talked to you about it. And her response isn't like, oh shit, like I really fucked up here, like I haven't listened, and like my son's telling me right now that he can't have communication with me because I don't listen to him. And instead she is like, oh, poor me, I'm very upset about the fact that I don't have a functional relationship with my son. And I was like, there's these points where it's like, I think Daniel Evans has described this like very perfectly, first of all, because Daniel Evans is an amazing writer and is like flawless in terms of like plot narration.
Can be flawless, yes.
Yes, I was like, Daniel is so good at it, but she's kind of described this as like where like the juncture in the road comes up, and it's like you can see where they should be going, but the places where the story is doing like the work that it's supposed to be is like when they veer off into the way that they shouldn't. Absolutely. And that's going to impact the rest of the story. And so I was thinking about that when I was writing like those specific kind of scenes, especially when it's like we could be getting more and like know more of like who Samson is, or even like who Monika is maybe, or like maybe even know more of who Sammie is through interactions with these people who are closest to her. But instead it's like, because she's like so unreliable, it's like, no, it's gonna be
which frustrates everyone, and probably everyone around as well. With Samson, you know, we were just talking a little bit about the extra layer of queerness on top of motherhood, which is already a complicated thing. And then we add in the complication of like having this neurodiverse child. So what kind of research went into characterizing that through an unreliable narrator?
Yeah. For myself, I was, it's been fascinating to see the kind of discussion. First of all, I love discussions about like what's happening inside of like a book. Of the very firm opinion that like once the book leaves me, then that's like people get to have like, you know, any kind of like interpretation or like, you know, like thoughts about whatever is happening. As I was writing the book, my thought was that there's nothing wrong with Samson, there's something wrong with Sammie. So my thought process was like, what does it look like when she's being told specifically, like throughout this book, nothing's wrong with him. Nothing's wrong with him. But in her mind, she's like, well, something has to be wrong with him because I am not connecting with him. Right. So she's like, in my mind, I was like, I thought about it a lot, actually. I guess like maybe the most research I thought about was, I was like, how does tone affect like how we read things? I thought a lot about, you know, there's those movie trailers where people take them and they put different music behind them. And so there's that one that was like the trailer for The Shining, but they recut it and put like buddy music behind it, and it was like
there's the ones that will just like take like childhood songs and it reframes. You'll never look at that song the exact same way ever.
Yeah. And I was thinking a lot, I was like, how do you turn the wheel just a couple of degrees to make it so tonally it's doing something just a little different, even if the story isn't changing? And I was thinking a lot about those like remade like movie trailers, like that one from The Shining that's like, hey, it's a father and son fun like buddy time, and I was like, obviously that's not what The Shining is, but I was like but I was thinking a lot about like the way in which like childhood is like horrifying, or like the ways in which like children can be perceived. Like I spent like 8.5 years running children's story time at a public library, and it was like, it's fascinating to watch because like children have like no filter. It's amazing. First of all, kids are the best. I think like
something all right.
I think I say this all the time, but I was like, nothing taught me how to be a better reader, like read aloud, than reading to an audience of children, because they will literally boo you. Like they will say, I'm bored, I hate it, I hate it. They'll get up and run around. Like you have never had a tougher audience than like a room full of children. Like that is like the best, like, it's basically like just being like, it's a trial by fire. It's a terrible situation. But I was thinking a lot about like the fact that like kids do like amazing, wild things. Like, there's always like ends up being those tweets and things where people are like, look at this like really funny thing like my kid did. They drew like all our graves. Like here's our gravestones. Like here's like my gravestone. Yeah. Like and then it's funny, right? But then like I was like, what is it like tonally if we just kind of shift it where the person like, okay, so like the narrator, even if it's like a third person, the close person who's like, oh my God, they drew my grave, like tonally, right. They're interpreting the things that kids are doing as terrifying, which I think it's easy enough to do. It's not hard to be like, kids all bite, kids say mean shit. Kids say mean shit and they don't mean it. Like they just are kids, right? Or it's like,
they do, yeah.
I mean, it's just like this kind of like ruthless honesty where it's like, I vividly recall telling my mom, like she got a perm and a haircut and I was like, you look ugly, you look bad. And I was like, I sincerely was like, because it was like my child brain couldn't like interpret like me being like, I like something before.
Yeah.
It was comfortable to me. I'm scared that you changed how you look. It scares me. But like, I don't have the access to that as a child. But like, as a child, it came out as like, you look ugly. Mm-hmm. You look really ugly. And that's, but it's like sincerely just how like a child.
And then as a adult, sitting here, like, how could you possibly say that? Yeah.
It's like, it's so mean. It's so mean. But it's like a kind of way in which it's like, okay, how about if this like is a narrator who is like, she takes all this stuff like very personally. And it's like, so anything like her son does, she takes it as an indication of herself and ways in which she's failed. And maybe she can't take that she's failed. So she puts on him that there has to be something wrong with him because there's no way it's her failing as a parent. And so I think I tried to think about it that way. I was like, I want to think about this deeply unreliable narrator who has so little like access with her own self to like be like, here's in the ways in which I failed, like not only my son, but also in my relationship that I've had, like the ways in which I am culpable, I'm responsible for some of it. And she can't do that. So it has to be something is wrong with him, not that something's wrong with her. Right.
Because we see like pretty much his entire like adolescent life in less than 300 pages. And so we see so little of like what of the actual moments. So the only moments that we really see of him are the moments where Sammie's just like, this kid is like driving me nuts. I cannot like connect with him at all. So we only really see like her moments of frustration as well. Mm-hmm. So like that's another thing that I really loved about this book is the structure and the pacing and the moments that we see, because there are some things where it's skipped over, like Monika and her relationship. We never really quite see the fights or the falling out or the couples therapy that's mentioned when their marriage is falling apart. And so we kind of, as readers, we kind of have to piece together what happens in those moments, but the moments that we do get are just so characterizing. So like, how do you choose like which moments that you wanted to focus on and which ones that you kind of wanted to like give to the reader and say, here you go, like figure out what happened?
Yeah. I mean, I think some of that is that I think it's even for people in a relationship, especially a long-term relationship, it almost feels like deeply unknowable to be like, I don't understand how this happened. Like, I don't understand how this unraveled. I don't understand, you feel like you can kind of piece together parts of it, but it's so hard to know. First of all, it's like, I think it's so hard even to know yourself. So then to be like, I understand how
another person on top of us, like how we interact. Yeah,
exactly. And I am a huge proponent of, I love writing that's just like the kind of like everyday experience of lived life. Like I'm usually, don't get me wrong, like I love an explosive physical scene, but I'm less interested in like the big kind of like moments of like coming out or getting married or like a birth or something, more than I am like, what are the little things that kind of frame up a life? So, what is this stuff? Like, I was thinking a lot about this relationship between Sammie and Monika as being like, right, it's a completely dysfunctional relationship, but I was like, how does dysfunction manifest and how does it build on itself? Mm-hmm. So for these two, what did their relationship look like as it started out? How did it build? What were the ways in which like there was dysfunction there? And like, like when there's something that happens and people decide not to address it or kind of gloss it
Exactly.
over
It
it.
slowly builds.
Yeah. And I thought of it as kind of like a callus, like building a callus
Yeah.
in terms of dysfunction, where I was like, things happen inside of this relationship. They didn't have the tools or the ability to deal with how to resolve it in a way that was helpful. So instead, they're like, well, we won't deal with it right now. And when you don't deal with something like that, it generally means it just happens again. Happening again in a maybe a worse way. But I was like, okay, so then what does it mean? Like, and it also usually means like when certain behaviors like happen and we allow them to happen, it kind of opens the door, cracks it open wider for like other stuff to happen until like the time where it's like, right, like what's the thing that finally makes it so a relationship breaks? And quite often it's something where it feels like, I don't even know, like this small thing just happened and the entire relationship broke down. But in reality, it's been this like big callus that's built up.
Here. Yeah.
And so I was thinking a lot about that, where I was like, because this for me felt like the book is like a lot about like failure, but it's also like more like a character study of kind of like who these people are and how different ways of like ignoring like dysfunction in a relationship has made it so that when they get to a point, it's like this is it. This is the point has happened, and we can't like go back from it. And like there's no like moving backward. And like the way in which like dysfunction can build in this kind of like right like layering kind of calloused kind of way. But I don't know. I because I do think there's like right there's something to be said for like writing into the scene, but I also think like there's also the thing like the things that are left unsaid usually feel like weightier to me, like the spaces and silence of things, right? Where it's like things happened, they weren't like great. Like what were they? Like, do we even necessarily like need to know like every single we can understand like from the interactions that are there that those are not the only interactions that have happened that are dysfunctional.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that especially we see the weird aftermath of the relationship too. And this was probably honestly one of my favorite parts too, is how they still live together, even though they're like towards the end, they're still live together. They're clearly separated. They're saying that they're like, oh yeah, my ex-wife, but we're not really divorced yet, but we're going to be, don't worry about it. We're also still raising this kid. So like it feeds into, the idea of like a lesbian trope, which is even like mentioned in the book, which like a great like moment of just like self-awareness, which is like really fun and like kind of feel like the humor of your previous book, Mostly Dead Things, and it just kind of feeds into this book of the moments of just like, oh my god, this is so gay sometimes, which is a really fun time. So like I have to know, just like, what is your favorite lesbian trope that you're just like, what can I like feed into characterize a lesbian relationship with like domesticity and the infuriatingness and the messiness, but
I think there's, first of all, there's just so many, right? Or it's like, it's fun almost, and it's like at a point where it's like, why not like self-reference those things as a community, like the lesbian community, we reference that stuff constantly, right? Like we're like,
I could just U-haul it right now, and my non-lesbian friends will look at me and they're like, what is going on with you right now?
Where it's just like, it's like, why, like for myself, it feels like if it's something that feels like a part of like, like the lesbian culture to do that stuff, I'm like, why wouldn't it be in the book? Like, right, like why wouldn't that be like like I like writing like that. She's like makes that recipe that she finds on Facebook from somebody that she had sex with, and it's like the joke in their relationship. Both of the wives had sex with this woman, and they knew her as the ear girl because she like put the tongue in the ear too much. And I was like, this feels like, so maybe that like,
so
like
bad.
I was like, maybe that's something that I really think is funny, where it's like kind of like, oh, like the joke about being like everyone's had sex with each other, right? Like Alice Piasecki from the L Words, like the chart, right? Where it's like everybody's kind of connected to like, degrees of Kevin Bacon kind of way. But on it, like it's kind of that way where it's like, oh, really? Does that really happen? And then you're like, oh, actually, I did have sex with that person too, or something. It's like the ways in which like the trope is like, I think it's like very fun to be like, the self-examination of like what those lesbian tropes are, because a lot of times it's being like, well, things aren't that way, but then it's like there's a trope there for a reason, and we still kind of touch on them sometimes. There's a reason why like U-hauling is a trope, and it like definitely does happen in this kind of way. I think it's interesting to consider. So I'm always like I'm also a person that like wants to unpack and repack and unpack and repack the joke as many ways as I can. So it's like, if I can like take some kind of like lesbian trope and like use it in fiction and then like kind of unpack it there and then like re-examine it and ask it in a different way, then that's exactly what I want to do. And that was a very fun thing to do. But maybe like, yeah, maybe that's my favorite thing, is to be like the trope about like lesbians all in like a community of all slept with each other and dated in some kind of way.
Yeah. Well, Midtown Reader is in Tallahassee, Florida. So before we open up the floor for other questions, we obviously have to talk about the fact that the Florida-ness of this novel. It is so Florida. It felt like driving down I-75 straight into Orlando. It felt like drinking Trader Joe's wine in the backyard while I'm getting eaten up by mosquitoes. Like, especially when she's like in her backyard, I'm just like, ooh, I can feel that. So where, like, something about the geography and the exploration of like queer spaces specifically in Florida really stuck with me. Now, I'm not a parent yet, nor are like most of my friends, but we have noticed more and more that like a lot of queer spaces in Florida revolve around drinking and dancing and dating apps.
Right.
And it goes back to like what we talked about earlier of like the foreign idea of like domesticity and like normal in motherhood and queer relationships. So do you think this is something that's like Florida specific? How does like Florida personality amplify that like idea?
Yeah, that was something I was thinking a lot about when I was writing this book, because I mean, as a person who grew up in Orlando, like I lived there my whole life, except for like small, like I lived in Gainesville for a little while, but it's like kind of similar. Right? Okay. Like, it's like, okay. Like, but I was thinking a lot because there's like, Orlando has so many queer people, right? It's like theme park culture, like queer people love to work at the theme parks. So it's like,
yeah, that's interesting.
yeah, there's a lot of like, oh man, like not to diverge, but like when I was single, like anybody I hooked up with on the dating app was because they were like working at the theme park.
Stop, that's hilarious.
Yeah, I was like, it's like another person at the theme park. But I was like, I have to drive out to iDrive and go look. I was like, oh, I'm tired.
Like, I go.
I'm like weighing out. I'm like, is this worth the drive? Anyway, it'd be like, it's so there's tons of queer people in Orlando, but there's very few queer spaces, right? There's, you know, I mean, I don't have to get into like Pulse or whatever, but there's like, right, there's like a certain number of queer bars, and like they're not like growing, like they're dwindling. So there's not queer spaces, and the spaces we do have are kind of this like very interesting thing, I think, where it's like kind of like queer people making a space their own, even though it's not necessarily queer. Like in Orlando, we have like gay IHOP. It's this IHOP that's like next to downtown, and it's like it's gay IHOP, but what happened is like management like hired like, it was like a gay management, and they started hiring like gay employees, which meant that it became this space that felt like a safe space for queer people, where it's like, this is gay IHOP, queer people can go here. It's maybe like this word of mouth kind of thing, where it's like, here's a queer space, basically like DIY queer space. But it's also a thing where in your mind where it's like, this is not a queer space, it's a corporation, and at any moment this could be not a queer friendly space, right? All you need is for like somebody else in management to come in, and it's not a queer space anymore. And so the culture in Orlando is and I think in Florida, like we were talking about, is there's like plenty of bars and drinking culture and like nightclubs and things like that. And the correlation between like what if you are like parent and you have a kid and you have a baby and something like that, like how do those things kind of fit together? I was like describing the concept of this book to an editor friend who lives in Brooklyn, and I was saying like, you know, like the idea of like how isolating that would be to be like when it's like maybe you don't have your biological family anymore because you're estranged because of queerness or from whatever's going on, and so you have found family and community that you build as a queer person. And what would that, how lonely that would be to be like lose that community because of a choice of like, I'm having a child, and so you don't have those friendships anymore because those friendships are built in like bar culture or like, you know, like hanging out like drunk brunch on like a Sunday or something. You can't do it anymore. And the editor friend was like, well, why wouldn't they just join like a gay mom group? And I was like, gay mom group in Orlando? It's like bold of you to assume that that's like a thing that would happen. But I think that there's this kind of like very specific kind of divide where it's like, you know, here's where queerness is like young, like drinking culture, nightlife culture, and then being like okay, now like what is it to be like
A mom, yeah.
a mom or married, or like I'm looking to this kind of like lens of domesticity. And also
Yeah.
like, because I do think that quite often like domesticity can, especially, as a queer person, it's very easy to like fall into patterns of like, just because a relationship is queer doesn't mean like they're not following patterns of like heterosexuality or like,
Right, yeah, that was another thing that was interesting about this novel is like Monica's like obsession of being normal or like falling into certain domestic traits or domestic types, and
yeah.
how the aversion to that can sometimes lead into like the opposite direction and contribute to the falling out of their relationship too.
Yeah, because it's like it's one of those things where it's like, okay, like Monika is like fun dad, like, right, like she's like, well, I work, I want you to stay home, like please take care of our child. But then it's like, like what is Sammie able to do? Like, she does not have her own income. She's like completely reliant in a household like upon like her partner's support and money. And like what does that look like where it's like, okay, well, I've been home all day and I'm expected like the idea of like roles being like, well, since you're mom and I'm like mom that's like a working mom, obviously you'll be in charge of meals and cleaning and stuff like that. And since I'm paying for things, like falling into these kind of like
That, like white picket fence ideal, except they both happen to be women.
yeah, exactly. I think it's very easy for stuff like that to happen because like many of us were even raised in those kind of households. So it's like, it would feel almost kind of natural to fall into roles like that. We're like, okay, sure. Yeah. Like, since you're doing this, I'll do this. And it's like for Sammie,
What
like,
does domesticity look like without that? Yeah.
yeah, I was like, for Sammie, I was like, she doesn't like doing this stuff. And she's like, I don't like cooking. I don't like being here. Like, this isn't like who I saw myself as being, but because I've like decided to like be this kind of role in this relationship, here we are. And like, what does that look like? There's not really renegotiating maybe like roles like that, like where it's like, okay, well, we're like, like 8 years into a relationship, 10 years into a relationship, and now we have to like renegotiate. It's like, actually, I don't like doing this now. Like you do. Like that doesn't like, that doesn't like work out for like
That's not very well.
yeah.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions from our audience. One is from our owner, Sally Bradshaw. She says she is so grateful for your participation in our 5th birthday. Indie book selling is a labor of love, and we're so appreciative of the support of amazing authors like you. Thank you. I'm curious, could you have written this book 10 or even 5 years ago? How much has our change in cultural norms and readers' acceptance of those changes impacted your writing?
Oh, that's a really good question, actually. I don't, first of all, like I'll answer it twofold because I think as a writer, no, I don't think I could have written it. I feel like I've been, yeah, I feel like who I am as a writer and what I've been able to access in terms of like what I was trying to get at with teeth. I don't think I was in a space where I would have been able to like make the book. But I also think, yeah, I don't know, like I was like looking at for instance, like not to like try and like talk about like, so Mostly Dead Things to me, like my first novel, I wrote that novel. It came out with Tin House, which is an amazing press. I love everybody at Tin House. They're the fucking greatest. They but it was like I was going into the situation. I was like, thanks for taking a chance on me. I don't know who's going to want to like, like I know my audience where I thought I knew my audience. I was like, it's just queer people and people who are interested in like messiness and like, aren't afraid of, the messiness of a body and a mind in this kind of way that's very, very gay in Florida. And I was like, I don't know how that elevator pitch does like on a like consumer level for like, and the book ended up doing well in a way that was completely unanticipated for me, and I still have like a very hard time understanding. Like I'm so appreciative, but it was like not something I ever expected. But because that book did as well as it did, it's like when queer work I think does like well, there's like, oh, there's an audience for this outside of like right, it like cracks the door open, and then other people have an opportunity
Right.
to like write cool queer work that's different, right? Like it's like, like
one that you wouldn't exactly expect.
Yeah. So it's like, because it's like the idea that like every queer experience would be the same. Like me writing about gay shit is like, that's one small little like very white cis like kind of experience of like, of queerness. And it's like the idea that like queerness could be like just that thing is crazy. So it's like, it's been like great to see like, but like imagine like 10 years ago, I think my girlfriend has been doing like a project for Autostraddle where it's like kind of like doing this catalog of like, you know, like queer work of like what queer work has come out, and every single year it expands like a little bit more, right? Because it's like, oh, like, because we know as writers and artists and like consumers of art, like writing and like publishing are not the same.
Very different things.
They're very different things, right? Like we have like, here's the art, and then also here's like the kind of like corporate kind of publication process, and the people who are in charge of that kind of stuff, you know, it's like whatever's happening, but they're trying, like it's a business, and so they're looking at it in terms of like what makes money. Do they like? There's not necessarily an understanding of like, I don't want to go into like a diatribe about this, but it's like, no, I don't think that this book could have been like a 10 years ago book, because I don't know if anybody would have taken a chance on. I mean, I was like, these, for me, this is a book about like, I was like, this is a book about, I hate like talking about like likable and unlikable characters, because that no, I don't care about that. But I was like, I love like the messiness of people. And I was like, this is a book about discomfort and failure. And I was like, asking people to sit with discomfort and failure and queerness. No, I don't necessarily think I would have been able to sell that book 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's always an interesting thing that people are doing more often in queer stories, because, you know, as a bookseller, you know, I get, someone came in the other day and asked for books recommendations about queer, or from queer people of color, and I was like, this is the best like request that I've ever had. Let me like go ahead and point you to all of my shelves and stuff like that. My favorite recommendations are the ones to make where people aren't necessarily looking for a queer author, but they want an author about family dynamics, or they want an author about things like that. And that's the kind of the point of like having a independent bookstore where we're able to give people books that we wouldn't necessarily want or seek out, but we're able to say, oh, if you like this, and you will like this. And that's something I really appreciate about With Teeth, is it's not necessarily overarching about this is so gay, but it's definitely very like, this is a family dynamic. It's examining the microorganism of a family in such a macro lens. So it's a really neat thing that it's doing, that a lot of queer authors are doing more and more. So it's really exciting to see.
Yeah, I do. And I think that that's something I've been so excited, because I was like, I'm a writer, but I'm also a reader. I'm fucking thrilled. It's been like delightful to like see, like, there's been like 2 books that have come out like within recently about like kind of like family dynamics, of course, right? Like Tori Peters' Detransition Baby, which is like, and Pizza Girl. I fucking loved Pizza Girl. It's so, because it's like, it's queer, and it's also like the idea of like what a family looks like. It's like a young like pizza delivery girl, like she's like working delivering pizzas, and she's like got like a relationship with like her high school boyfriend, but then she's also like obsessed with like this woman that she's delivering like pizzas to. Pizza Girl, that is a good ass book.
That sounds really good.
That's a great book. But I was like, this is like examining like the family dynamics of this, because it's like she's living with like her high school boyfriend, like with her mom in the house, and like they have like a family there, and she's pregnant, but she's also like, oh, like I'm becoming like the queerness is like not like, it's not her like a discovery of queerness. It's basically like, I have feelings for this person, and like I'm exploring this, and like what does family look like what does my life look like, you know, it's like, I adored that book. That book was amazing. Like honestly, top tier.
Another question that we have is, can you explain the picture behind you? Is it a painting? Is it a poster? It doesn't look like it has a bottom behind it. Apparently the audience in store is dying to know.
Yes. This is Judy Garland. My girlfriend and I bought like an old record off Etsy of a live Judy Garland concert, and it came with like a Judy poster inside of it. So we like framed it. But yes, it is Judy Garland, which feels very gay.
Like Forever Judy, is that what it says in the top?
Yes. Yes.
The other question that we have is, what is your typical writing style? Are you a morning or an evening writer?
Oh, this is a good question. I'm a person too where it's like as soon as I feel like I know like what a like process is for me, like if I tell myself then it changes. I will say it's much easier for me to write earlier in the day before the internet has like completely rotted my brain. Like,
Before Twitter scrolling just takes over.
yes, absolutely yes. Because it's like, and if I'm too online, even like I don't even like Twitter, first of all, yes, I love it, but also horrible. It's like not good, it's not good for productivity. It's not good for me like manufacturing anything other than like the worst joke on the Lord's earth. But it's like even going into my email and being like too interested in email and trying to reply to an email, it's like I need to be like, I don't know. I think I've been trying to do, which I think is just hard. I don't know, wake up in the morning and like maybe not be on my phone first thing. It's very difficult. It's very difficult because like a lot of times it's like, right, it's next to us. We use it as an alarm. Like we have to like check to see if things are going on. If I can like read first, even if it's for like 10 minutes while I have coffee, like put coffee in my face, just read first. It's like more helpful so that I can kind of be in a frame of mind to go into, ooh, if I can, I just set up so like, well, there's this like daily delivery Monday through Friday. It's like through like poetry. It's like Ada Limon is doing it. It's called The Slowdown. Every morning, Monday through Friday, you can sign up for these emails that come, and it's Ada Limon talking about a different poem, and it's just 5 minutes of your day. It's 5 minutes of your day. First of all, Ada Limon is impeccable. Just like I am obsessed with everything.
Everything in Earth is okay for like 1 second.
Yeah, I mean, it's not asking a lot of you. It's Monday through Friday. It's a 5 minute listen, and you don't have to like go into any kind of thing. You can literally listen to it on your phone in the browser. It's 5 minutes of a poem, her talking about it at first, and then reading the poem aloud. It's called The Slowdown. I think it's incredible. It's an amazing way to start the day because it's only 5 minutes, so you don't feel like you're like having to have like a huge commitment. And also it's Ada Limon, so just saying it's worth your time. But it's a great way to start the day. And then I like to go and like from there try and like if I can even get like anything I write, I don't necessarily go in to be like this is going to be like something really good. I basically am like I'm going to try and write some stuff. Will I keep any of it? Maybe not. Yeah, it's like I'll just throw it in the document. Let's see. I'm less concerned with like the quality of it is like let me just try and do this, because if I get really focused on like if something's good, then I don't think I'd ever finish a project in my life.
That's fair. On that note, do you have any advice for any aspiring authors, specifically queer authors?
Oh, I think maybe just like from personal advice is like we're our own worst critics. I feel like I'm a terrible critic of my own work. It's very easy to be like, what you're making is garbage, is a stupid idea, or like, you know, right? Like it's
Imposter syndrome. It's always there. Yeah.
It's always like that. I was like, and I will say this as a person who, I don't know, like I feel like I've had like success in some things. It's hard for me even to say that right now. It's like
When you're just longing for this glory.
It's very hard. It's hard to be like, you know, because it's like I think like when we're making art, and like art is like looks like so many different things. Like, right, like I I think just like to be a little easier on yourself. And I say that right now, and also I'm trying to apply it to myself because I think it is so detrimental to be like consistently like everything you're making is garbage, this isn't worthwhile, it's not helpful. It's like it's really hard. Oh, another thing I would say to do that's also has been helpful to me, aside from like Ada Limon's Slowdown, which you should sign up for, it's amazing, is Jamie Attenberg's like craft talk newsletter she does. It's an email that comes kind of like once a week, and it's about like different things like thematically. She does like 1,000 words of summer, which is like a thing where it's like a writing prompt where it's like every day, like, you know, try and write 1,000 words, whatever. But like she also does craft talk newsletters, and they're free and they're good to sign up for. They have like these kind of things where it's like she's very good at kind of touchstoning on like, you know, like how to deal with like thinking that your work is shitty. Like Another thing I would say, like from a perspective of like queer writing, is that like any kind of like idea of queerness in writing is super valid. So even like us talking earlier about being like, let's like, haha, like a lesbian joke or like a trope or something like that. Those things are valid. I'm a huge fan of writing pop culture into anything. I love it. I think it works. So it's like, I think we can like kind of psych ourselves into a point as like queer writers, or being like, well, maybe this is too queer, or like it's like an audience won't like it. But I would like venture to say, like, actually, like, you're your audience first. Like, I'm my own audience first. And if it's something I like, I wrote a Pat Benatar joke into something, and you know what? I kept it in there. I was like, this is funny to me and I like it. So it's like, and if that's not gay, I don't know what is. But I was like, this is funny. But my editor was like, I don't like that. I'm like,
as long as you laugh, you know,
it's staying. But because it is one of those things, right? It's like, you're your audience first. And if it's something that's like funny to you, like, I think just like, don't like cut the legs out from under yourself, like stay in there. Like if it's something queer too, or like, I don't know. I think it's always worthwhile to like have an examination of those things. I think we are hard on ourselves. It's very easy to be like, no one will like this. Who will think this is important? But it's like, at the end of the day, like, you're your audience first. And I love how I'm saying these things, and I'm also trying to say it to myself. Please let me.
That's where most of the best advice comes from, is the advice that you can't actually take yourself, but you're trying to, so you tell other people to do it.
I'm trying really, really hard. I would tell everybody here, it's really hard. I think working on art, like no matter what art looks like, and I think art like exists in all kinds of ways. I'm a huge fan of like, I love TV, I love like comedy specials, I love like any kind of music or art, like the things like what we say like art is, I think is like very broad. And I think we're very hard on ourselves. I think we can be very, I say it from like a personal experience. I was like, I think it's very easy to like shoot your own shit down. And it's like, it's a harder thing to be like, I'm going to exist with this and like try and see where it goes. So like, give it a chance, like give it a chance to like turn into something. Cause I think like, what is it gonna like, right? Like my basically that's my entire process of writing a book. I'm like, what's the worst that can happen? I'm the only one that sees it.
That's a dangerous path to go down. Oh goodness. Well, are you working on anything new right now? I know this came out.
I am. I feel like I'm not myself if I'm not working on this, because I feel like I'm like one of those people. I'm like, I haven't been doing anything, but then I'm like,
one of those people that has like 10 different projects going on in the back of your mind. You just kind of like figure out.
I have a novel like draft out to my agent that she's looking at right now. It's kind of like Dyke Haunted House, kind of like, I guess I would say. Yeah. I was like, that's maybe the most I could say. I don't like writer's superstition about talking about things too much before they're a thing. Yeah. But it's like very butch and also like handyman kind of stuff.
Okay, interesting. We're looking forward to that then. Yeah. Just a little bit of horror thrown in it. I mean, that was the kind of thing with this, is that I felt like it was just in time for Halloween, because this is horrifying to me.
Yeah. Thank you. Actually,
in conjunction with like Mostly Dead Things. Like if anyone hasn't read that one, I also highly recommend that one. It was such a interesting comparison between this one and that one, of just like the different dynamics of family that you can explore, because there's always so many different dynamics you can explore in family.
I do. I like to think about, I mean, I think especially like with teeth, I was like, how is this like kind of like horror? And I was also like, in what way is this like discomfort kind of horrifying? Like that book, like I thought about the whole time being like, you know, when you're out at a bar and you're like, you overhear people like sitting next to you and something's happening with them, and you like finally like tune in, like you listen to them and you realize they're on the worst date you've ever heard, like a bad first date, like a really, really bad like Tinder date or something, bad date. Then like you're listening to it and you're like, oh, this is so horrible. Like, of course, but like some of it is you're like, thank God it's not me. But then you're also like, oh, but it has been me. Like I've been there before. Yeah, exactly. Where it's like, I was like, I am like interested in the ways in which like discomfort can manifest. And I was like, I'm also always looking for a way in which I can kind of find the joke in something. And I think that like,
well, those two go hand in hand sometimes.
Yeah. I was like, how can like discomfort be like funny? Like, how uncomfortable can something be and I still find humor in it? Like, I love an idea of like a dinner party from hell kind of situation, right? Like, I think that's like very funny because you don't have to, you can look in on the train wreck like as a reader. But I also, a thing I think too is like, okay, um I'm getting off onto a tangent, but I was like, I love like in ways in which it's like, okay, like you want to look in this, you want to be a voyeur of like the discomfort, but also as like a writer, I'm like, okay, now you have to stay with me. Like you have to sit with me. You have to like actually be part of the discomfort. And I was like, this is like a very fascinating kind of way to think about like craft. I was like, everybody's on a journey with me of discomfort. And I was like, how uncomfortable can something be and still be funny? Is like maybe like that's with teeth.
Well, thank you again for joining us this evening. Again, if you'd like to purchase Kristen Arnett's book, we have it in store, we have it online, you can ship anywhere in the world. Come join us this weekend for our 5th anniversary celebration. Kristen, thank you again, and congrats on the long list for that prize. We're so excited for you and hope to see you get on the short list.
Thank you so much. Honestly, I wish I was there with you guys in person, but like, congratulations. Amazing. Yes.
Awesome. Well, have a great evening, everyone. Thank you again. Good night.
Good night.